Hey guys, Tammy here. And in this video, I'm going to talk about 3 steps to healing while you're trying to co-parent with a narcissist. And when we're coming out of these narcissistic relationships, we've really been in this cycle of this toxicity and the abusive behavior, the gaslighting, the manipulation, all the things that are going on. And yet we're still faced with that person every single day when we have a child with them. And so in the midst of all of that interaction, you're actually trying to heal from this relationship. And that can be super challenging. So before I dive into these 3 tips, let me just remind you, if you find my content helpful, please hit like on this video. Also subscribe to the channel so that you get notified as new videos are released. And if you have not yet subscribed, please do so. That helps me out. Sort of like I show you love by creating content, you show me love by clicking like on the video. Okay, that's the exchange here. So let's talk about healing when you're in this kind of position where you are having to deal with the narcissistic person. One of the things that I think that happens right away is we are so focused on the other person in those initial stages in particular, because at the point of breakup, obviously there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of negative emotion towards each other. And for most of us, we're very focused on the things that that person has done or has done to us or has done to the children or, whatever the circumstance may be. I have shared that in my first marriage, my ex-husband had 3 affairs before the marriage ended. And so I came out of that marriage pretty angry and pretty upset with him. And my focus was on him much of the time. And I can tell you that looking back in, hindsight, that really did delay my progress in healing in a lot of ways. So I think the very first thing that you have to do is you have to put the focus back on yourself. But, you also have to have grace for yourself as part of that. I think the focus on yourself comes with self-care and all those kinds of things that we talk about a lot. But I think, one of the best forms of self-care is having grace for yourself. And I think that we don't think of it in those terms a lot. We think about, especially women, I think we think about massages and, getting our nails done and all these different things that are also a form of self-care. Sometimes sleeping, just getting extra rest, meditating, going for a walk, taking some time out for yourself, all those typical kinds of self-care measures. But I think that many times we're still beating ourselves up in our brain, right? We're still saying, wow, how could you have been so stupid as to get in a relationship with this kind of person? And how could you have been so stupid as to have stayed for as long as you did? And why in the world would you let somebody, do these things to you? And I think as we start to recognize more and more that this was a toxic relationship and that this dynamic was very unhealthy, then we start to question like, well, okay, then why did I allow this? And I think that's where we start to get into the therapeutic aspect and really kind of digging down and figuring that out so you don't repeat those mistakes is very critical. But I think in those very beginning stages, you have to try to have grace and not beat yourself up for, whatever actions or reactions that you had in this scenario. I've seen a lot of people who are so reactive to the other person that they end up losing time with their children and different things because the court thinks they're the problem. And it's really just come out of their emotional reaction to the other parent. If we put ourselves in a pressure cooker, of course we're going to explode, and I'm not excusing any behaviors or anything like that. I'm just saying that you have to remember that you're human, and that you're not perfect and that you probably have made mistakes in this process. And so you have to give yourself grace for that. If you haven't had great judgment in certain things or you haven't done everything perfectly, It's okay. You need to give yourself that grace. That's part of the healing process. The second thing that we have to do, especially when we're dealing with a narcissistic person, is we have got to learn how to have good boundaries, how to have better boundaries. And this really is a critical piece to the healing as well, because without that boundary, you cannot insulate yourself enough from that person to get healing. You keep being re-traumatized. A lot of people have PTSD type reactions or triggered reactions or things of that nature. And it's really difficult to heal from those things when you're not getting enough insulation from this toxic person to be able to do that. Now, again, I know we have to co-parent with this person, but that doesn't mean that you don't need boundaries, okay? I talk about this a lot. I think sometimes when we first come out of this, we're sort of taught that having a boundary is, standing up for yourself, right? And I got to tell you that it's kind of interesting because when I work with people who have been through these types of abusive narcissistic relationships, it's very interesting. There's a lot of times I get comments about, male, female and all that kind of thing, or giving more female examples or whatever. And, typically narcissism does tend to be a more male dominated diagnosis. And so I do tend to have more female clients that are dealing with a narcissistic ex. However, I do have male clients that are dealing with a narcissistic ex also. And the interesting thing is, you can still see those common characteristics, whether it's a man or a woman. We're the codependents. We're the ones that have not learned to have good boundaries. We're the ones that have experienced the gaslighting, the manipulation, the abusive behavior, the verbal and emotional abuse, all those kinds of things. Those are commonalities, no matter which, flip of the coin, male or female, that you're on. It doesn't matter. So whether you're a man or woman going through this, you probably have poor boundaries or inability to draw strong boundaries. And that's part of what lands us in that narcissistic relationship in the very beginning, because, having a poor boundary is essentially sacrificing all of yourself for the other person, right? I sacrifice every single ounce of myself and my own well-being in an effort to try to please the other person or to make them happy. And many times what happens is, after years and years of doing that, we'll become resentful. I can remember at the end, my ex-husband saying to me, like, you're a bitch all the time. I mean, that's essentially what he said to me. And it's like, at the time I was, very upset by that comment, obviously. But when I examine that after the fact, it's like, well, yeah, because I was completely giving 150% of myself without ever getting anything in return. And a relationship is, a mutual pouring into of each other. And that's true in all relationships in our life. I mean, even down to our children. Like, I know that we as parents pour into our children, and we don't, expect our children to pour into us, but in certain ways they do, right? They come in and they say, I love you, and they hug your neck and kiss you and, do things. And I mean, they don't do that as teenagers, right? Those are the kind of the ungrateful years, but we get rewards from that, even the parent-child relationship, right? We get to see our child develop and grow and have those kind of proud moments of their accomplishments and all these kinds of things. Relationships are meant to be reciprocal in that way. And what happens in the narcissistic relationship is they're the taker, usually us or the codependents. We are the givers. We're the people pleasers, right? And then you end up where you've given so much that you then resent the other person, or you gave in an effort to gain validation from them or gain love or admiration or whatever it was that you were after in that instance. So drawing that boundary is really about learning, what things do I want to do for you, or am I agreeing to do for you because it's what's best for me, or it's what's best for the kids, or whatever. Or sometimes maybe it's helping out your co-parent and doing something nice, but not doing those things to the point to where I'm sacrificing my own well-being. And, this boundary issue is really important for you if you're in kind of that in-between phase where you haven't started dating again or seeing anybody or anything like that. This is a real important thing to figure out for yourself before you venture into that next relationship. Because if you're still in that habit of where you're sacrificing your own well-being for the other person, you're going to end up in another lopsided relationship like that. And eventually the person that's the taker, that's willing to take at that level, is going to be done at some point, and it's not going to work anymore. It's going to stop satisfying them. You give and give and give so much, and eventually you hit a point to where they're not happy with it anyway, and you've sacrificed everything, right? So taking care of our own self, taking care of ourselves the way we would take care of a child, a human being that's been entrusted to us, right? We take better care of other human beings than we do our own self. And so we need to learn how to do that for ourselves as well. The third thing that you have to do, I think, is that you really need to get some support in this. When I talk to people who are coming out of these types of relationships, the one thing that I hear, there's probably several things I hear over and over, but this is one of the key things that I hear over and over, which is that they just feel so isolated, or they feel like nobody understands, or they feel like everybody else thinks that their ex is this nice person, wonderful person, kind person. And then you get behind closed doors and this is a totally different person. It's like, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And it's difficult to explain to somebody that hasn't experienced that type of relationship. I can remember when I married Thomas in the very beginning, he used to say to me, like, nobody can be as bad as what you're describing with your ex, and he's like, he comes over, he's a perfectly nice guy. He's kind to me, he's whatever. And as the years went on and we had different incidences that happened, he finally started to understand. And he was like, wow, this really is as, insidious as what you described. And I said, yeah, on the surface, everything appears fine. And if somebody doesn't see it behind closed doors, they don't get it. And one of the things that narcissists really try to do is isolate people. They want to isolate you because that's how they manipulate and control. That's part of what enables them to do that. And it's very interesting because, like with me, even after the fact here, I've been divorced for, close to 20 years, about 18 now. And my ex has always had this way of, he will not allow me to interact with any of his new mates, and I think for fear that he'll be found out about things. Like the person that he's with now, he's been with several years. She's a perfectly lovely person. I like her. We have no problem being in the same space, her and I. But he's the one with the problem. And I think because his house of cards would probably come tumbling down if her and I compared the wrong notes, right? So this whole thing can be really crazy making and just make you feel very isolated. I talk to people who are depressed, who are without their children, who are struggling and feel like they're the only one going through it. I had a client this past week that said, I have no frame of reference for this. Like, frankly, nobody in my family's ever gone through anything like this. I don't know of anybody that's gone through anything like this. And I just don't even know where to start. I have no resources, no input, no experienced people around me from which to draw to help me figure out how to deal with this. And this is complicated, guys. Let me just tell you, it's not straightforward. Okay. This is beyond regular co-parenting when you're dealing with a narcissistic person like this. And I've been working and living this for over 15 years. So this isn't something that you just separate from that person and you suddenly know how to deal with them magically. It doesn't work that way. It's a process. You have to get the support around you that you need. You have to get the education, and you have to learn how to handle these things effectively, because you're managing the narcissistic side and the court side, right, of your child custody. And so you've got to learn to integrate both of those things into the way that you handle the various situations that come up. So if you'd like to learn more about my coaching services and how I might be able to help you with that, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's a link on that page where you can book a time to speak to a member of my staff, learn more about my services, and how I might be able to support you on your journey. See you guys next time.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the